Welcome to Mr. B's Ukulele channel. Please subscribe and I hope you enjoy watching.
This is the tutorial for La Vie en Rose, and in the sing-along I'm going to be joined by Leiko, who's going to help me sing this, and she's going to actually sing this in French and I'm going to sing it in English. So you're going to have the two choices as to which language you sing it in, but for the tutorial I'm just going to go through the English version, so have a look at that today, and if you fancy it on Friday you get an extra treat there and you can explore a bit of French in the song as well. So for today we're going to talk about the strumming pattern and the chords, and we'll start with the strumming and then we'll look at the chords and then we'll look at the layout of the piece, and I'll give you a bit of a demonstration. It's not too tricky in terms of the way the piece works. The real challenge is simply some of the difficult chords that are in there. So it is quite a, I've made it one of my more difficult levels as a piece, and that's simply down to the fact that it has some tricky chords in it. So here we go. So I'm going to look at the strumming first, and I'm going to start on a G and I'm going to strum on the G to begin with. So join me on a G, and I'm just going to do a simple down, down, up strum. And that's the main strum that goes all the way through the piece. Nice and slow, nice and steady. Hold me closer, hold me fast, the magic spell you cast. So just this nice, on the G again, this nice, slow, beautiful, slow strumming pattern. Okay, and that's the strumming pattern, but there's a bit more to it, so we can add an extra down, up, down, up. So we can do the down, down, up, down, up, down, up. And I just do that on the first couple of lines of each verse. Hold me close and hold me fast. Da, 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 da. So it's just on the long chords where it doesn't change chord quickly, where you've got the same, effectively the down, down, up, down, down, up. Where you've got it twice, you can actually exchange that for a down, down, up, down, up, down, up. I'll just do that slowly. Down, down, up, down, up, down, up. You can see the diagram, it's just down, down, up, down, up, down, up. And it just adds a bit of variation, makes it a bit more lilting and a bit more flowing, instead of just down, down, up, down, down, which can be a little bit stilted, because it is a love song, so it just gives it a bit more of a sort of romantic, lilting feel to it. So I'm just going to play the G and the GM7, which I'll explain in a minute, and you'll see how that works. So, hold me close and hold me fast, this magic spell you cast, this is La Vie en Rose. So you saw at the end on the A minor and the D7 I went back to the down, down, up, but for the first three chords there I actually played the longer pattern just because it fitted in into the space of the lines there. So, and that's really down to your personal preference, where you put the long pattern and where you put the short pattern. In brief, you're doing a down, down, up all the way through the song, and wherever you feel you want to, once you get used to it, you can put that down, down, up, down, up, down, up into the song to just add a bit of variation and make the song flow a little bit more. So that's the strumming pattern, and that's really down to you. For the main part today we'll focus on down, down, up, but you might hear me put the odd down, down, up, down, up, down, up into it just as we go along. Okay, let's look at the chords now, and this is where it's going to get quite challenging, so I'll try and take you through the chords quite quickly, but allow you to focus on each one, and you can always stop the video and go back if you need to. So it starts on a G. I don't think there's any difficulty there for our G, but then it goes to a GM7 or G major 7. Now, a quick note here, quick technical music point, sort of bit of musical theory for you. Where it's a capital M, because you'll notice on the A minor, the AM that we're used to seeing, the AM is a lowercase m. Now, lowercase letters always refer to the minor chords. Now, if it's a capital M in the case of GM7, that means G major 7. And you'll notice, I mean, a G on its own is effectively a G major chord. You'll notice the G chord and the G major 7 sound very, very similar. And it's only because we're adding that 7th note that it changes. And actually the G7 to G major 7, the very similar. If we compare the G, G major 7, G7, they're all variations of the same chord. So there's a lot of similarity between these chords, and we're really doing some subtle chord changes in this piece, which is what makes the piece so beautiful. It just dances between these very slight chord changes very, very nicely. So the GM7 in itself is actually quite easy. It's almost a complete bar on the second fret, but we don't put the top string in. So it's just the second, third, and fourth string down on the second fret, one finger across the 3. It's nice and easy to play. And when we go from the G to the GM7, I just keep that top finger on and just flatten it. So you just go from the G to the GM7 and just flatten that finger. It's quite simple. And then we have the G6, which is a bit trickier, but it's not too difficult to play. Basically, we then have to lift our finger up again, go back to the G with our second finger coming in, but we don't add the third finger. So a G6 is just like a G, but without that third finger. So it's 1, 2 basically. And from the G7, go like that and just sneak that first finger back in. That's the G6. So I'm going to go G, G major 7, G6, and you'll see how that goes. G, G major 7, G6, and then A minor. So you just lift that second finger up to the A minor, A minor. Now the A minor to D7 is always a lovely transition. Just flatten your finger across the whole bar, add your third finger on where you put it for the C, and that becomes a D7. A minor to D7. A minor, D7. Just practice that one for a second. A minor, D7. So we can do that whole first verse. Hold me close and hold me fast. The magic spell you cast. This is the beyond rose. Now the second verse uses the same chords again. So we're on the A minor. When you kiss me, heaven D7 sighs, and though I close my eyes, back on the A minor, I D7, C, La, V on G, Ro, D7, Rose. Then we're on the G, G major 7, G6, G7 and C. So that goes like this. When you press me to your heart, I'm in a world apart. So that was a G major 7 to G6 again. G7 here, world where roses bloom. So you go from the G6 to G7. It's a bit of a transition, G6 to G7, G6 to G7. And then some tricky ones here. The C minor 6 is basically, I have to look at it, is that. It's a whole bar on the second fret and nearly a whole bar on the third fret, but without the top string. You can just do the G string on the second fret and bar on the third fret, avoiding the top G, but it's easier just to do a full bar on the second fret. Now, if you look this up online, you'll see that a lot of images you find, a lot of channels will suggest using your first and second finger there. Personally, I find my second and third finger slightly easier, just because you've got to, if you do your first finger, you've got to pull it back, and it's just a bit of a squash. I find it a bit tight, I feel it aches a little bit. If you do your second and third finger, I feel it sits more comfortably there. So it's up to you. You can either do your first and second or second and third, but I'm always going to reference it as a second and third finger job, and it's up to you which of those variations you prefer. I'm just going to go from the C into the C minor 6. A world where roses bloom, and when you speak, angels sing from above. So there we go, the C minor 6. Have a go at it. Down, down, up, down. Down, down, up, down. Down, up, down. Now it's quite an easy chord to play once you've sort of looked at where your fingers go. In the middle of the song, when you've got about 10 other chords on the go, that's the hard part of this song, just getting that chord in the right place. It's such a slow ballad, if you get it wrong it sort of stands out quite badly. So that's really one of the hardest parts of the song, that's C minor 6. A world where roses bloom, and when you speak angels sing from above. Everyday words seem to to love songs. And we had a B flat diminished chord there. That's another brand new one. And that was first finger on the A string, second finger on the C string, both on the first fret. And the joy of it is, if you're playing a G, which we are doing in this song, is G to B flat diminished. Actually, all you do is slide those two fingers down to the first fret and take your third finger off. So G, really easy, just lose the third finger, slide down to the first fret. So that's actually quite a nice song, quite a nice chord to play. B flat diminished, join in, B flat diminished, or B flat dim. And that's C minor 6, the G and the B flat diminished are the tricky parts of the song. Once you got your head around that little bit, it's actually quite easy. So let's just go over that again. I'm going to go back to the G7, A World Where Roses Bloom. A world where roses bloom, C minor 6. And when you speak, angels sing from above, B flat diminished. Everyday words seem to A minor turn into D7. Love songs. Then it finishes like it did at the start. G, give your heart and soul, G major 7 to me, and life will always A minor B, La D7 B on G rose. And there we go. I've sort of done the demonstration as I've gone along, so I'm not going to do all of that now, but there's a short introduction and a short outro. I'm just going to play those outro, I think that's a word, basically a short ending. Intro and outro I've put on the screen, and I'm going to play those for you now just so you can see how the piece opens and closes, and I'll give you a bit of a demo of the first verse and the final one going into the ending. So the intro goes like this: G, G, G major 7, A minor, D7, G. Hold me close and hold me fast, the magic spell you cast, this is La Vie en Rose. And then we carry on. Then the ending: give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be La Vie en Rose. Then the ending: G, G major 7, A minor, D7 and G. And there we have it, and that's the piece. That's the strumming, the chords and the layouts of the piece. It's the chords that are really tricky in the middle of there. Do have a look at that C minor 6 and that B flat diminished chord, and then have a lot of fun. It's a beautiful song. Do enjoy. Thank you.